Have you ever walked into a room and just completely blanked on why you're there? Or maybe you've gotten home from the store only to realize you forgot the one thing you went out for. Well, guess what? You're definitely not alone. That's just your brain doing its thing. And figuring out why that happens? Well, that's the whole point of cognitive psychology. So let's get into it.
So picture this. You're at home, maybe you're in the kitchen, and you notice the light is kind of dim. You look up and, yep, a couple of bulbs are out. No big deal. A quick run to the grocery store will solve that. You have one job, one single simple mission. Get in, grab the light bulbs, and get out. Should be easy, right? Famous last words.
So you're walking down the aisle, minding your own business, and bam, your plan goes right off the rails. A huge, flashy sign for cereal catches your eye. Buy two, get 30% off, it practically screams. And just like that, light bulbs are no longer the only thing on your mind. Okay, so cereal makes you think about breakfast, which, oh yeah, reminds you that you're almost out of milk. And you know what? While you're at it, you might as well grab some orange juice, some bread, some butter, maybe some cheese for sandwiches. Your super simple mission has officially snowballed. So you make your way through the store, you pay, you drive home, you start putting everything away. And then it hits you. As you're sitting in your kitchen, which is still dimly lit, you realize you forgot the light bulbs. Does that sound painfully familiar? Yeah. This little everyday mess-up is actually the perfect window into how your brain really works.
To really understand why our brains do this, we've got to rewind the clock a bit. Because for a long time, psychology didn't even bother trying to look inside the mind.
So before the 1950s, the big idea was something called behaviorism. And behaviorists basically said the mind is a black box. You can't see inside, so who knows what's going on? All they felt they could study was what they could see. A stimulus goes in, a response comes out. But then, a revolution started brewing. A new generation of thinkers came along and said, wait a minute, we can and we must study what's happening inside that box. They started seeing the mind as this active system, constantly processing information, kind of like a computer. This cognitive revolution didn't happen overnight. It was built piece by piece. In the 50s, a linguist named Noam Chomsky started poking holes in the old ideas, arguing that language is way too creative for a simple stimulus response model. Then, in 1956, Herbert Simon and Al Newell actually built a thinking machine, which gave everyone this powerful new way to think about the mind. And finally, in 1967, Ulrich Neisser wrote the book, literally called Cognitive Psychology, that tied all these new ideas together and gave the whole field its name.
And what's so cool is how these different thinkers all built on each other's work. You had Neisser, who basically defined the whole field. You had Chomsky, who tore down the old way of thinking. Simon gave us that information processing model, and then there's George Miller, and we're definitely coming back to him, who gave us a real, concrete number for the limits of our own brain power. Together, they cracked open that black box. Okay, so let's get back to that shopping trip. If we break it down, we can actually see the core functions, the main tools in our cognitive toolkit in action. First up is perception. Now, this isn't just about seeing or hearing. It's about how our brain snags all that sensory info, light, sounds, smells, and organizes it into something that actually makes sense to us. The whole adventure started with perception, right? You didn't just see light, you interpreted it as dim. You recognized that the old bulbs had different shapes and sizes. That's your brain actively making sense of all the data coming in.
Next, we've got attention. I want you to think about attention as a spotlight. The world is throwing a million things at you at once, and your brain has to decide where to point that spotlight. It's the filter that decides what gets in and what gets ignored.
And this is exactly what happened in the store. In that chaotic environment with thousands of different products, your attentional spotlight swiveled away from its original mission, light bulbs, and locked onto that bright, shiny cereal sign. I mean, that sign was practically designed to hijack your attention. And, well, it worked.
So once something has your attention, your thinking and reasoning processes kick in a high gear. This is the part where you're actively juggling ideas, trying to solve problems, and making judgments. It's the heavy lifting of cognition.
You didn't just stare blankly at the cereal, right? No, your brain started crunching the numbers. You were comparing the brand name with the generic. You were thinking about whether it was a good deal. Maybe you even factored in which kind your kid likes best. All of that is complex problem solving, and it happens in seconds.
And finally, we get to the big one, the one we all have a love-hate relationship with, memory. Memory isn't just one thing. It's this whole complicated system for taking info in, filing it away somewhere,
and then hopefully pulling it back out when you need it. The grocery trip relied on a specific kind called working memory. Think of it like your brain's temporary scratch pad.
And this is where the whole plan fell apart. Remember George Miller? Well, he discovered that our working memory has a pretty shocking limitation. Most of us can only hold about 7 things, give or take 2, in our head at any one time. So when you started adding milk, bread, cheese, and juice to your mental list, the original item, the light bulbs, just got bumped right off the list.
So, this toolkit in our brain is powerful for sure. But as we just saw, it's got limits, and it's also not perfectly logical. To save time and energy, our brains use all these little mental shortcuts, or heuristics. But sometimes, those shortcuts can lead us down the wrong path.
Let's actually test one of these shortcuts right now with a classic little thought experiment. I'm going to describe a person named Steve for you.
Okay, so based on that description, is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? Go with your gut. Now, most people, almost everyone, immediately says librarian. I mean, the description fits our stereotype of a librarian perfectly. But this is where our intuition gets us into trouble. Here's the twist. There are way more farmers in the world than there are male librarians, like by a huge margin. So statistically, it's much, much more probable that Steve is a farmer. So why do we all get it wrong? Because our brain takes a shortcut. It's using what psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman called the representativeness heuristic. We judge the probability based on how well the description represents our stereotype, and we completely ignore the cold hard stats.
Now, understanding all these processes, perception, attention, memory, and all our weird biases, it's not just a fun brain teaser. The cognitive revolution completely changed how we see ourselves and how we build our world.
The impact of this stuff is literally all around you. The idea of the mind as an information processor, that paved the way for artificial intelligence. Understanding our own thought patterns led to things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a hugely effective tool for mental health. Even the design of the apps on your phone is guided by principles of attention and perception. I mean, its legacy is massive, shaping everything from how we teach our kids to how we run our economies.
So, from a simple trip to the grocery store to our most complex global systems, our world is shaped by what's going on inside our heads. By understanding these processes, we basically get a user's guide to our own brains. So the next time you forget the light bulbs, you'll know exactly why. And that leaves us with one last thought. Now that you know about them, which of your own mental shortcuts are you going to notice today?